My whole life I was told to man up. Be strong. Don't feel. Don't break. But strength looks different when silence finally cracks, and the truth comes out. People love to say things like, childhood shapes who you are. I wish that was not true, but looking back, I think mine damn near welded the blueprint in steel. I grew up hearing the same 3 lines on repeat. Be strong. Stop complaining. Just deal with it. Scraped knee? You are fine. Bruised ribs from falling off the garage roof? Should have watched your step. Heart broken by some girl in middle school? You will live. Boys do not cry. That last one, my old man said it without even looking up from the sports section. I had walked into the kitchen with red eyes and a lump in my throat, thinking maybe he would say something useful. Instead, I got a grunt and a lecture about not acting soft. My mom was not much better. Her brand of toughness came wrapped in silence. She would clean the blood off my elbow, hand me a Band-Aid, and then go right back to chopping vegetables like I had not just wrecked my bike and nearly cracked my collarbone. If I ever tried to talk about how something felt, like really felt, her response was always the same. Do not make a scene. So I learned not to. By the time I hit 10, I knew how to bottle things up so tight they never even saw daylight. I could smile when I was angry. I could nod when I was hurting. I could say, it is no big deal, even when it felt like the world was falling apart under my feet. That skill, if you want to call it that, earned me a gold star in my family. Mason's the strong one, they would say, like it was some badge of honor. Like silence was the same thing as strength. But what they really meant was, I was the one who never pushed back. My younger brother, Tyler? Whole different story. He could throw a tantrum over not getting extra fries and still get rewarded with ice cream. Me? I could ace a math test, do all the chores, and not make a peep, and the best I got was a good muttered over a mouthful of dinner. Eventually, I stopped trying. I just did what I was told, stayed out of trouble, and figured if I kept my head down long enough, maybe one day someone would finally see me. Spoiler alert, they never did. But that silence, that just deal with it mindset, it followed me. Into my teens, into adulthood, into every damn room I ever walked into. And I thought it was working, until something happened that made all of it come crashing down. By the time I hit 28, people at work called me reliable. I was the guy who picked up the slack, stayed late without being asked, never missed a deadline, and never said no. Boss needed someone to cover a weekend shift. I was already halfway to the office. Karen from marketing forgot her part of the report. I quietly fixed it and let her take the credit. Every company has that one person who keeps everything from falling apart. That was me. Not because I wanted to be a hero, but because deep down, I had this voice in my head saying, do not complain. Do not be difficult. Just deal with it. That same voice followed me home, too. I was living with my girlfriend, Danny, at the time. Been together almost 4 years. She was smart, sharp, the kind of person who could own a room without trying. And I loved her, I really did. But somewhere along the way, I stopped recognizing myself when I looked in the mirror. It was little things at first. Her deciding what we did on weekends, what shows we watched, what color the new couch should be. I always told myself, it is not worth arguing over. Then it got bigger. She wanted to switch careers, so I picked up extra freelance work to cover the rent. When her sister moved in with us, just for a month, it turned into 6. I gave up the home office so her sister could have her own space. Set up a little desk in the hallway next to the laundry machines and pretended it was fine. Even when Danny forgot my birthday, said she thought it was next weekend, I smiled and told her it was no big deal. She laughed, kissed my cheek, and went right back to scrolling her phone. People always say relationships are about compromise, but mine felt like a quiet surrender. My friends noticed. They started saying things like, you okay, man? You seem tired lately. I would just shrug and say, yeah, just busy. And that was not a lie. I was busy. Busy carrying the weight of everyone else's comfort on my back. It got to the point where I did not even know what I liked anymore. What food I actually wanted to eat. What I would have done with a free Saturday if no one was making the plans for me. And the weird part? No one saw it as a problem. In fact, they praised me for it. You are just so patient. You are the stable one. You make things easy. I wore those words like a uniform. Smiled through the ache in my chest. Told myself that being the strong, dependable one was enough. But it was not. Not anymore. Because one night, something small happened. Just a tiny thing. Barely even worth noticing. And yet, That was the moment the crack finally started to show. It was a Wednesday night. Danny was hosting a dinner with her coworkers, all of them laughing over overpriced takeout and some wine I had picked up on the way home. I was barely through the door before she handed me a list of things to do: grab extra napkins, light the candles, pour the drinks. I was tired. I had pulled a double shift. I had not eaten, but I nodded and got to work. About an hour in, one of her coworkers knocked over a wine glass, red wine, on our light gray rug. Everyone gasped, and she immediately turned to me. "Mason, can you grab the cleaner?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Sorry, babe, I will get it." Just, "Mason, clean it up." I went to the kitchen, opened the cabinet under the sink, and something in me just stopped. I stared at that damn bottle of carpet spray like it was a symbol for every time I had swallowed my own needs, pushed aside my feelings, stayed quiet when I should have spoken up. That bottle? It was not heavy, but my hand would not move. That was when I felt it. This slow, quiet burn deep in my chest, like something inside had been waiting for years to say, "No more." I left the bottle under the sink and walked back out. Danny was still chatting, laughing, like nothing had happened. I looked around the room. Nobody noticed me standing there, empty-handed. Nobody cared. I sat on the edge of the couch, stared at the wine stain, and then stood back up and walked out the front door. No jacket, no keys, no destination. Just out. I walked for an hour, maybe two, past gas stations, past closed shops, past people who did not know me and would never ask me to do anything. For the first time in years, I let the thoughts come. All the buried ones. The ones I had shoved down every time I told myself to be the bigger person. It was not just Danny. It was everything. My boss, my family, even my friends, sometimes. Everyone knew I would say yes, that I would never push back, never set a limit. I was dependable, but not because I wanted to be, because I had been trained to be. That night, something changed. It was not rage. It was not sadness. It was clarity. I did not want to be anyone's emotional punching bag anymore. I did not want to be the nice guy who just kept giving until there was nothing left. I went home just after midnight. Danny was already asleep. The wine stain was still there. I stared at it, then turned off the lights. That was the last night I ever swallowed my voice. Because soon, very soon, I was going to say no. And I had no idea what would happen next. It started small, quiet. The next morning, Danny asked me to swing by the dry cleaner before work. I looked at her, opened my mouth to say sure, like always, and then I stopped. My voice came out low even. "I can't." She blinked. "What?" "I'm not doing it today." Her face twisted, surprise first, then confusion, then something close to offense. "You always do it." "Not today." I did not raise my voice. I did not explain. I did not apologize. I just said it like a fact, like saying the sky was blue. And that silence afterward? It was the loudest sound I had heard in years. She walked out without saying much. But that one tiny word, "no," was all I could think about for the rest of the day. It felt strange, like I had just broken some rule I had never agreed to follow in the first place. All day, I thought maybe she would text, maybe blow up my phone, maybe pick a fight. But nothing came. Just silence. That night, I expected a storm when she came home. Instead, she acted like nothing happened. Until dinner. She asked if I could take her sister to the airport on Saturday. I said no. Just like that. Danny stared at me. "You've got the time." "I know," I said. "But I'm not doing it." And this time, she got mad. She asked if I was trying to make a point. If I was punishing her. If I was okay. But I did not argue. I did not defend myself. I just said, "I'm done doing things I don't want to do." It shook her. I could see it all over her face. Not because I was yelling, but because I was not. Because for the first time in our 4 years together, I had stepped off the script. I was not the predictable Mason anymore. I was something new, something uncertain, something she could not control. And the weirdest part? I felt calm. Not angry, not proud, just calm, like I had finally let go of a weight I had been carrying for decades. That night, I lay in bed beside her, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. She had her back to me, her breathing sharp and irritated. I could feel the distance growing between us, and I was not afraid of it. But what I did not know then, what I could not possibly see, was that this tiny shift, this first firm no, was just the beginning. Because the next boundary I set, it would blow my whole life wide open. It was 3 days later when the past came knocking, disguised as a phone call I almost ignored. I had just left work, sitting in my car in the parking lot, letting the engine hum. My phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a name I had not seen in years. Dad. I stared at it for a few seconds, thumb hovering. I had not talked to him in nearly 5 years. Not since the last time I went home and he told me to grow a thicker skin after I mentioned how cold things had always been between us. Back then, I left his house in silence, just like I had learned, just like he had trained me to. And yet, there he was, calling me now, like nothing had happened. Against my better judgment, I answered. His voice came through like gravel. Tired. Dry. He said he needed a favor. Said my mother was sick, that she was in the hospital, and they could use help with errands. He did not say he missed me. He did not ask how I was doing. Just listed off things he thought I should do. Drop by if you can. The lawn's out of control. Your mom's prescriptions are ready. I told her you'd handle it. Just like that. Like I was still the default helper. The old me? He would have driven over that night. Picked up groceries. Cut the grass. Smiled politely at their cold stares and called it family. But this version of me, the one still holding on to that quiet no, sat still for a long second, then said, I can't. Dad went silent. Long enough that I thought he had hung up. You can't, or you won't. I answered honestly. Both. You always were sensitive, he muttered. And just like that, I felt the old guilt start to crawl back in. The pressure, the itch to smooth things over. But I did not backtrack. I hope mom's okay, I said. But I am not the kid who drops everything anymore. I have my own life now. He scoffed, said something about how I had always been dramatic, then hung up. I sat there, staring at my reflection in the windshield. I half expected to feel crushed. But I didn't. I felt like I had just taken a sledgehammer to a wall I spent my whole life pretending was not there. And that was when I realized something. People do not take boundaries well when they have spent years benefiting from your lack of them. And I had a feeling this was just the start. Because later that night, Danny found out about the call. And her reaction? That is when everything truly unraveled. I told Danny about the call later that night. We were eating takeout, sitting across from each other in that familiar silence that had started growing between us like mold. I figured I would mention it casually, just to share. Not looking for advice. Not asking permission. Just saying it. My dad called, I said. First time in years. She barely looked up. What did he want? To dump a bunch of stuff on me. Errands. Expectations. Same as always. Her chopsticks paused midair. So what did you do? I told him no. That was it. No drama. No big declaration. But the look Danny gave me. It was like I had confessed to abandoning a puppy on the freeway. You told him no? She repeated, like she had not heard me right. Yeah, I did. She leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms. He is your dad, Mason. I nodded. He is also the guy who treated me like a burden for 28 years. She blinked. So you were just cutting him off? I am drawing a line. She stared at me like I had grown a second head. You are not that guy, Mason. You do not just walk away from family. And there it was. That word again. Family. Used like a leash. I stayed calm. I am not walking away. I am just not playing the same role anymore. Danny set her food down. She did not eat another bite. For the rest of the night, she barely spoke. I could feel the storm building in her head, even if she did not say a word. And sure enough, the next morning, she let it loose. Said she did not like this new version of me. Said I was being cold, selfish, stubborn. You used to be easy, she said. Now everything's a battle. I remember standing there, still groggy, coffee in hand, thinking, she just summed it up without even realizing it. I had been easy. Too easy. The kind of easy that got people used to walking all over you and calling it love. But that version of me, he was done. You were right, I said. I'm not easy anymore. Her eyes narrowed. So what? You were just going to start saying no to everything now? No, I said calmly. Just to the things that break me. And that was it. The tipping point. She packed a bag that weekend. Said she needed space to think things over. She did not slam the door. She just closed it behind her like she was slipping out of a meeting early. And just like that, the silence I used to dread, it finally felt like peace. But the story was not over. Not even close. Because a week later, something showed up on my doorstep that I never expected to see again. It was a plain manila envelope. No return address. No fancy handwriting. Just my name, written in black marker, sitting on the welcome mat like it had been hand-delivered. No knock. No doorbell. Just left there. For a second, I thought it might be from Danny. But when I picked it up and opened the flap, I saw something I had not thought about in years, my mother's handwriting. Inside was a stack of old letters, some unopened, some barely creased, all addressed to me. Tucked between them was a note. It read, "He never mailed them. I found them in his desk after the hospital." No signature, just that one line. It was her. I knew it. My heart thudded hard in my chest. I sat down on the steps, envelope in my lap, staring at the paper like it might explode. I pulled out the first letter. It was dated the year I left home. 19 years old. The one time I had tried to stand up to my dad. Told him I was moving out, not going to work at the warehouse with him, not staying in town just to make him comfortable. He called me ungrateful. Told me I was making the worst mistake of my life. Said I would come crawling back. Apparently, after I left, he wrote me. The letter was short, almost awkward. "If you need help, I will be here. I still think you are wrong, but you are still my son." It was not warm. It was not some big emotional apology, but it was something. The next one came a few months later. Then another, and another. Over the course of years. Some were rants. Others were full of updates. Who got married, who died, what the dog was up to. There were letters from birthdays, from Christmas, even one from the day I turned 25. All this time, I thought he had cut me off. But the truth was worse. He wanted to reach out, but could not bring himself to actually send the words. He had kept them all, stacked in a drawer like maybe one day he would find the courage. But he never did. Now here I was, holding the words he never sent. And even after everything, after the distance, the silence, the expectations, I felt something crack. Not forgiveness, not grief, just a quiet realization. Maybe he was not the villain I had made him out to be. Maybe he was just another man who had been taught, like me, to swallow his feelings and just deal with it. And now he was in the hospital, alone. For a long moment, I just sat there. Then I stood up, went back inside, and placed every single letter into a shoebox. I was not ready to respond. But for the first time, I was not trying to pretend I felt nothing. And that small shift, was when I finally understood the difference between strength and survival. But just when I thought the ground had settled, I got another message. Only this one was from Danny, and it was not what I expected. Danny's message was short, almost too short. "Can we talk? I'm outside." I peeked through the blinds, and sure enough, there she was, sitting in her car, engine off, hands on the wheel like she was waiting to talk herself into coming up. I had not heard from her since she left. No calls, no texts, just that silence I had gotten weirdly used to. I opened the door, stepped outside. She got out slowly, like she thought the sidewalk might crack under her feet. She looked different. Not sad, not angry, just unsure. We stood there for a minute, no words. Then finally, she said, "I have been thinking about you. About us." I nodded but said nothing. She looked down, fiddling with the edge of her sleeve. "I was wrong," she said. "About the way I talked to you. About how I handled things when you started changing. I waited. I thought you were slipping away from me. But now I see. You were finally showing up for yourself. And I didn't know how to handle that." It hit me in a weird way, because I knew she meant it. There was no performance in her voice. No angle. "I grew up in a house where no one said no," she added. "Everyone just gave in, gave up, or blew up. So when you started setting boundaries, I panicked. I thought you were leaving. But really, you were just drawing a line." Still, I stayed quiet. Not cold, just listening. I wanted to hear all of it. "I miss you," she said softer. "But not the version of you that always said yes. I miss the version I never really gave space to exist." That's when it hit me, the twist I never saw coming. I had spent years being afraid that if I ever said no, people would leave me. But she was here now, not because I gave in, but because I didn't. For the first time in my life, someone was coming back not out of guilt, obligation, or control, but because they saw me clearer when I stopped hiding. I told her I needed time, not out of spite, not to punish her, but because now, I knew I was allowed to ask for space. She nodded, said she understood. No begging, no ultimatums. She got back in her car, gave a faint wave through the window, and drove off into the fading light. I watched until the red taillights disappeared. Then I went back inside, sat on the edge of the bed, and felt something I had never really felt before. Stillness. Not the kind that comes from shutting down, but the kind that comes from standing your ground and knowing you survived it. But the final lesson? The one I had not faced yet? that was waiting in the hospital room I had avoided for years. And the next morning, I went. The hospital was quiet in that eerie way only hospitals can be. Everything smelled like bleach and old hope. The nurse at the desk glanced at me, then pointed me toward room 19. I had not seen my father in almost half a decade. I had pictured this moment 100 ways in my head. Maybe he would be frail, hooked up to wires and machines. Maybe he would bark something dismissive. Maybe he would not even remember me. But when I stepped into that room, what I saw stopped me cold. He was sitting up, thinner, older, but still sharp-eyed. The same man who once stood like stone in our kitchen and told me to man up after my first panic attack. The same man who shook his head when I cried after Grandpa died. Now, his eyes flicked up to mine, and for a long moment, he just stared. Mason. That was all he said. My name. Not laced with disappointment or anger. Just recognition. I stepped in, pulled up a chair, and sat down. The silence stretched. He looked down at his hands. They were shaking. Whether from age or nerves, I could not tell. I guess you read the letters, he finally said. I nodded. I meant to send them, he added, voice low. Every time. But I always found some excuse not to. I leaned back. Why? He let out a breath that sounded more like a confession. Because I didn't know how to be anything but hard. That's how I was raised. My dad never talked about feelings. If you were tired, you worked harder. If something hurt, you kept going. He looked at me then, really looked. And I passed that down to you. I did not say anything. Not out of spite. I just needed to let it land. I thought I was teaching you strength, he said, barely above a whisper. But all I taught you was silence. I swallowed hard. For a moment, I wanted to stand up and tell him it was too late. That the damage was done. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the tremble in his voice. Maybe it was the fact that, for the first time in my life, he was the one asking me to listen. I leaned forward, elbows on knees. Do you regret it? He nodded, slowly, painfully. Every damn day. We sat in that stillness for a long time. Not as father and son. Not as combatants. Just two men, face to face with the ways we had both been broken. He reached over, tentative, like he was touching something fragile. I'm proud of you, Mason. Even if I never said it. Especially because I never said it. That sentence cracked something open in me, not in a painful way, but in a quiet, necessary one. Because in that moment, I understood, he had never known how to be soft. But I did, and the strength he tried to beat into me, I had finally reshaped it into something real. Something mine. Something I could pass on differently. As I stood up to leave, he said, You gonna come back? And I gave him a small nod. I'll think about it. That was my boundary. Not a door slammed shut. Not a desperate reunion. Just a choice. My choice. And for once that was enough. But there was still one final moment coming. One I never saw coming. 3 weeks passed. I did not rush back to Danny. I did not chase down more apologies from my father. I did not explain myself to anyone. Instead, I started doing something I had never really done before. I lived for me. I stopped overcommitting. I said no when I meant no. I let calls go to voicemail. I ate what I wanted. I slept when I was tired. I left group chats I did not care about. I stopped giving explanations for things that never needed one. And people noticed. Some backed off. Others got frustrated. A few, like Danny, surprised me. She reached out again, not to ask for anything, but to say thank you. Said my silence had forced her to look at her own patterns. She was in therapy now. Not for me. For herself. Funny how one quiet no ripples through everything. Even at work, something shifted. My manager, who had always dumped last-minute tasks on me, pulled me aside one afternoon after I pushed back on a ridiculous deadline. I expected consequences. Instead, he said, Honestly, I respect it. We rely on you too much. It was like the world had been waiting for me to stand up. I had just never tested it. But then came the last twist. On a random Tuesday evening, I checked the mailbox and found a letter with no name. Just a return address from a small town I had never heard of. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. No signature. No flourish. It read, You do not owe anyone the version of you that made them comfortable. That version died quietly, and no one noticed but you. Let them grieve. Let yourself begin. I read it 3 times. Looked for clues. Thought maybe it was from Danny, or my mother, or someone I had helped along the way. But no, it was anonymous. And somehow, that made it more powerful. Because whoever sent it, they saw me. The real me. Not the fixer. Not the doormat. not the dependable background character in everyone else's story. Me. And in that moment, I realized something I had been chasing my whole life. Permission. But I never needed it. Not from my father. Not from Danny. Not from anyone. The moment I gave myself permission to stop shrinking, I became whole. And no one clapped. No one threw a party. But I slept deeper that night than I had in years. Because I had finally done the one thing no one ever taught me how to do. Be strong, in the right way. The story ends there. No explosions. No revenge. Just a quiet boundary. And the man I was always meant to be, finally stepping forward.